As a tribute to Don Dunstan, we now present a special interview he recorded with George Negus.
The first time I interviewed Don Dunstan was back in 1970. I was a pretty green print journalist and he was a pretty green South Australian Premier. And I've interviewed him on and off over the years ever since. Not just for we media types, but for most people, and not just South Australians. Love Don Dunstan or hate him, agree or disagree with him as either an individual or a politician, throughout his very public life, he's always been impossible to ignore. And as it turns out, at the time of his very private impending death, he still had plenty to say. When I called him about doing the interview you're about to see, he said to me, "I'd like to think I've done a few worthwhile things during my life, and who knows, maybe my bloody death can be useful as well." How terrifyingly Dunstan is that? Political prejudices notwithstanding, the place won't be the same without him. I guess I have to be honest and say this is not the easiest interview that I've ever conducted with you, but where would you like to start?
Oh, well, I suppose I should start as to where I am now, because things are a bit defined for me at the moment.
It's an interesting choice of words to find. What's that a euphemism for?
Well, I have now a third bout of cancer. 3 years ago, I had this massive operation to remove a tumour, and it has been monitored since, and there has been no sign of any recurrence. Now we find that there are secondaries from that particular cancer, which are outside the wall of my right lung and inside my left lung. They're inoperable, and this particular strain of cancer is known to react for a period to some chemotherapy which I'm having, but thereafter, well, that's it.
How do you feel about that, knowing, I mean, that's as I said, that's an interesting word that you used, things are defined. I mean, how are you dealing with it? Is it something that you'd had thought about before, or something you're only starting to think about now?
No, I always knew that something like this might happen, and I'm accepting of it. I mean, what else can you be?
Bit like what's that saying, that there are only two things that you can be certain of? Death and taxes.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pretty funny thing to say to a politician, but you paid your taxes?
I have paid my taxes, and I shall die. I don't want simply to have some great occasion where people are nostalgic about what happened during my period in South Australia, and then say, well, that's it, you know, that's gone. I'm determined that my death will be useful.
Why am I not surprised to hear you say that? What is it about you that even in a situation like this, with your grip on life limited, do you still feel as though even your death might be useful?
Yes. I have been an adjunct professor in the Department of Social Inquiry at Adelaide University, with work which is really about the kind of agenda that I had in politics here. And they have decided, a group of people associated with me in the department and at the university, and a number of others in the community, that they'll set up a Don Dunstan Foundation, which will be associated with Adelaide University, and a chair will be founded in the Department of Social Inquiry, where I've been working, which will basically follow my agenda.
What's that
Well,
what's the Dunstan agenda? I mean, most people would not use the word agenda to describe what they're about.
it's the causes that I've been about.
You're not the slightest bit concerned about the use of the term cause either, are you?
No. They
People
are
shy away from it now.
No. They are as much needed to be followed now as they were in my day.
My goal really is to make this South Australian area the best of urban environments, the best of total environments to live in. And I'm trying to get a balanced, effective, workable community which is secure and at the same time gives an opportunity to people to develop themselves as they'd wish. I believe we are going to get in South Australia such a society that in our time and in our region we will have as much effect as the classic Greek city-states did in their time and region and subsequently. I believe we can do this here, and that's what my goal is.
We've had an aberration in social policy which has affected both parties in Australia, and that is this nonsense of the Chicago School with which we've been beset.
Economic rationalism.
Yes. And
which you regard as irrational.
I regard it as irrational. I believe that it is vital that the state intervenes to ensure social equity in the marketplace.
You don't believe the marketplace can do it on its own?
It can't, and that's amply demonstrated. And people who simply say, well, it's all out there and the marketplace will fix everything, even they are now having second thoughts from the Reserve, the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States to the World Bank and the IMF.
Well, why is it? Why is it if people are having second thoughts, people like bankers are having second thoughts, even economists are having second thoughts, social thinkers overseas are having second thoughts, why aren't politicians in this country having second thoughts?
Well, I don't know. Some of them carry on that there's nothing intellectual outside what they know, and they're wrong. I think eventually it's going to be borne in on them that this business of privatising, downsizing governments, letting the marketplace run, really produces a great waste of resources, does not produce an optimum social pattern within the economy, and community action is needed.
So it wouldn't surprise me, therefore, if you'd get a bit upset at the suggestion that has been made already, because you've been railing against this for the last year or so, that this is nostalgic indulgence on your part, that these are back-to-the-future policies.
The people who say that, and the Australians said that about my Whitlam Lecture, simply fail to address what was actually said in the lecture, and that is that these wretched people fail to take the lessons of history. The lessons of history are there. They're there amply, and they fail to look at them.
I am a character who in politics is constantly concerned with a reappraisal of assumptions, including my own, starting with my own indeed. I think you're dead as a politician unless you are looking at all the things that you came into politics believing about and saying, well now, is this right? Is this working in contemporary terms? Am I really doing the job that I set out to do according to my original motives?
I believe in democracy. I believe in a tolerant and inclusive multicultural society. I believe in protecting the rights of minorities. I believe in all the need to maintain human rights as a basis upon which people may have some effective influence upon their own lives.
And you don't see that being done in the current political and economic climate?
No, those things are being, again, we find that people pay some lip service to that in government, but undo much of it by the policies that they're following.
But when you analyse your own existence now, as you probably are, do you see it in overall terms as being unfulfilled ideals, dissatisfaction, satisfaction? What?
Oh, there were many things, particular policies that I wanted to follow, which unfortunately have not been, and I was disappointed that I wasn't able to pursue them.
Like what were big things for Don Dunstan that haven't happened?
Big thing was the fact that we'd established in South Australia under my government advances in the whole idea of industrial democracy, which were then thrown away and never revived. And those policies, which I considered with Olof Palme, the former Prime Minister of Sweden, would have addressed a number of social ills that still beset us. The ease of takeover of companies, the entrenched legalised piracy that we have in this country, which makes it very...
Not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah, which makes it very difficult for companies to invest in the long term, and that is absolutely vital to our future.
So you would never describe yourself as a narrow-minded pinko who's got no time whatsoever for business or corporate activity?
Of course not. Of course not.
Even though they've seen you as the enemy over the years.
Oh, they have. But so have some of the conservative trade unionists.
If you blokes want to hand to the employers the sort of demonstration which has just happened in front of every TV camera here, and say, that's how good the Labour Party can be with the trade unions in South Australia, then just think what you're doing to yourselves and your families for the future. You put Steele Hall, who hates every unionist in South Australia, back in there, and boys, you're going to have the things that we have done for you in the last 3 years taken away. They'll be gone. You won't have the rest of the trades union movement with you, and you will defeat the whole aim of unionism for conditions in this country.
Do you sometimes feel out of place in this country?
No, I don't. South Australia's always had a radical tradition, and in the past there have been significant radicals here. South Australia was the first in a whole series of areas in social history long before my time, and I am, after all, a sixth generation South Australian on one side and fifth on the other. This is my place. The fact that I disturbed it in certain ways is part of our tradition. I don't feel outside at all.
Why do you think a lot of the things that you've stood for, a lot of the things that you've tried to do, a lot of the things that you have in fact done, have made other people feel uncomfortable? What is it about Australians? I mean, comfortable is John Howard's word for Australians. It's what he would like them to be. But you seem to have been quite happy to make people uncomfortable about certain things.
Well, it was necessary to do so in order to get them to change. It's extraordinary now how people are these days not only accepting but enjoying those changes. And what they say about me was, well, you were ahead of your time. No, I wasn't. It was necessary to get them done then, and they're enjoying them now.
We have a fight on our hands. These people in Adelaide want to change that so that they can say to mining companies, you may go into the sacred land of the Pitjantjatjara, even if the Pitjantjatjara people say no. Now that is what we have to fight now. They will say that they should be able to decide whether the mining companies come in here, but that they will consult you beforehand. That gives you no protection at all.
never agree to that.
The whole question of race was always very dear to your political heart.
Yes, indeed.
It still is?
Yes, of
In
course.
the current climate?
Yes. I'm very disturbed that the present federal government is not properly pursuing the reconciliation process.
Why are they balking at the whole idea of reconciliation? What are they frightened of?
Well, the point is that they're appealing to those people who are some of them the constituents of the One Nation Party, working on getting the votes of those who express downward envy.
Downward envy?
Yeah.
Without getting your blood pressure or your temperature up too high, after a lifetime of commitment to anti-racism, if you like, how did you feel about the emergence of the fish and chip lady from Ipswich and her party?
Well, it was a great misfortune for Australia. I mean, one always knew that there were people who were still racist in the community. You don't eliminate racism within this community, but what is impressive in Australia is that we have made it basically socially unacceptable. Really, it is socially unacceptable. That's why
To be
racist.
Yeah.
You come out to my district and see me in the pub with the boys, and everybody in the place said, oh, well, Don's one of the boys, and they treat me as such. I've never believed in formality or in being upstage about anything. I always try to relate to people as genuine human beings. And, you know, I get on extremely well with people on the factory floor.
How do you feel about the fact that people have been interested in you during your life, always interested, despite the fact you've been out of politics per se for 20 years?
20-odd years.
People are still interested in Don Dunstan. You still fire people's imagination and their wrath. And now, with death staring you in the face, as it were, I can't think of another way of putting it, people are interested in you all over again.
Well, I suppose it's gratifying that they do. I have found it surprising that I get the amount of attention that I do so long after I have been in office. I had never imagined when I left office that it would occur. It has, and I imagine that's because those who know or experienced what we were able to do here in South Australia in the 10 years that I was Premier was to use the democratic process basically to alter the social and political and cultural life of the state very significantly.
Other politicians have come and gone who would like to think that they'd had an impact, been relegated to a pretty ordinary chapter in history. But you haven't. A bit larger than life after all these years.
Well, I hope that's useful when I die.
Hansard, August the 16th, 1973. The Honourable D.A. Dunstan. Like rumours of my death, unusual race, insanity, divorce, sexual bizarreness and personal wealth, it is not only untrue, but also greatly exaggerated.
I've often wondered about this, that you've been so private about your private life and so public about your public life. I'm wondering whether there are... but at the same time, you appear to be a consistent person. There aren't two Dunstans, no two Dundun. But is your private life and your public life, have they been at war within your existence? I mean, how have you balanced the two? You've been adamant that your private life is your private life,
Yeah.
including your sexuality. But everything else about you is utterly public.
Yeah.
How have you managed that?
Oh, well, simply by insisting, George.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've never wavered on that, have you?
No, never wavered on it at all.
Yeah. What are you going to miss most? Stupid question, but I mean, what are you going to? What is it that that you enjoy doing, that you'd like to be able to keep doing? There's another way of putting it.
Well, keeping on in some ways being constructive. I will miss the fact that for much of my life I haven't been able to do some of the things that I might have enjoyed, simply because I constrained myself to causes. Well, okay, but I have enjoyed a very full life, George, and I have had and have some absolutely wonderful friends. I get such loving support from people.
Andrew, how do you feel about having a father as a Premier?
Oh, well, I enjoy it very much. I'm interested in politics, aside of having a father who is Premier. Though I suppose this comes from having a father who was involved in politics. He was in politics even before I was born. I take this as part of my life, and I'm very interested in what he's doing. I try to help.
But what about family? How is that for you at the moment?
Family have been around. My son has been here leading the charge about setting up this foundation. It wouldn't be at the stage it has, despite the fact that the Vice-Chancellor and the university have embraced it enthusiastically and are quite gung-ho about getting it up and running. But that couldn't have got to this stage without my elder son's work. He's back here. He lives in the United States now, but he's back for 6 weeks. And he said, well, I thought, what's the present I can give to Father?
To be here.
To be here. And he's done a tremendous job. All my kids are tremendously supportive. My younger boy is in Darwin at the moment and will be moving to Brisbane before long. But he's been down from Darwin and spent time with me, and my daughter rings pretty well daily, and you know, they're always available to come and help.
You mentioned the foundation again. Is in a way, is the fact that you feel a need for something like that to exist, to continue your agenda, at least an inferred criticism of your beloved Labor Party? Has it failed you?
The Labor Party is now absolutely beset by faction, which is far less about policy than it is about personal fiefdoms in handing out the measly spoils of defeat.
Have they lost the plot? The Labor plot?
Some of them have. Yes, and that's sad. The Labor Party really needs to get back to the position where its goal was in delivery of policies effectively for the people. Now, there are some people in the Labor Party who are about that, certainly, but there are some who are not. And the Labor Party has to clean up its own act.
I didn't think I was a very suitable Premier, as a matter of fact. I didn't think that I'd be a very good leader for a party. I was probably too much of a prodder and a radical, and as it is, I think I'm probably rather more radical than the party I lead in many ways.
How important is leadership? I mean, and does a leader have to be ahead of the pack? That's that problem we've got now. Nobody's ahead of the pack like you were.
Well, leadership is important because it is perceived as important by the public. You can't carry the public with you without effective leadership. And it's important from the policy point of view that the leader is right in there with reform policies.
Can a leader lead without ideas?
No.
Is that the problem? There aren't any ideas around at the moment.
Oh, the ideas are around, but sometimes they're not being adopted. Issues are not being tackled.
What about Kim Beazley? And this is a chance for a pro-Labor plug. I mean, is Kim Beazley up to the job? And do you think he will become Prime Minister of Australia?
Yes, I think that Kim is tackling things well. He's really taken the leadership of the party on board.
But that's different to the leadership of the country.
Well, I think he's doing that too. And he's doing it in his own individual way, but that's quite appropriate. But
has he got to do a Blair?
Kim and I
to get to government. Has he got to do a Blair?
He doesn't have to do a Blair.
Hasn't got to reinvent himself in the Labor Party.
No. He's really getting back to getting the agenda right again. Now people say, oh, this is just going back to old policies. Let me reflect, George. Earlier this year, I was asked by the ACTU to do one lecture in the Whitlam series, the first one outside New South Wales. 5,000 people turned up to pay to get into that lecture.
What's your explanation for that?
They wanted to hear what were the politics of intervention.
Because in this country, 5,000 people at a political meeting is a contradiction in terms, isn't it?
Doesn't happen.
So you don't think you're out of date then, obviously.
And they didn't either.
Yeah.
We will intervene to retain our right to a say in our own future, to temper the marketplace, by action to provide services and social justice, to retain institutional safeguards and provide needed development in the community interest. For we know that we intervene or we sink. Thank you.
Can I ask you this? You're not a religious man.
No.
What's your prop, particularly at a time like this? I think you said once that if there was a providence, it's not been very kind to me at times. What's your prop right now? Because a lot of people use religion as a prop. What's keeping you going?
My prop is love of people, George. That's what it is.
Due to our tribute to Don Dunstan, tonight's programmes will now be seen half an hour later than advertised.